Friends, hearty welcome to all of you. It's great to see that we have a good participation here. This is our second webinar, and as you know, we conduct these webinars around topics of learning, education, creativity, better and more effective methods of teaching and learning. The whole idea is that all of us are connected to education. We are either teachers or we are conducting programs for children, and we are all learners, of course, in our own lives. So all of these sessions are supposed to build our own awareness, make us question our own beliefs, biases, and we all collectively learn from each other and move and adopt better methods of learning and teaching. That is the whole idea. And there are some people who have done much more work than each of us. And we have one such guest today, Ramesh. And we're privileged to have you. Thank you so much, Ramesh, for giving your time. We've had close association with Ramesh and CLE as well. But Ramesh has his own work, enormous work that he has been doing for the past several years with his colleagues on education, on developing better methods, better pedagogies of learning, which are more child-friendly, at the same time more effective. And he has been particularly spending a lot of time in developing pedagogies for mathematics. But here today he will be talking in general about whatever subject we each of us may be interested in, how to make our methods more effective and more child friendly. That is what Ramesh will be talking about. Of course, the Ramesh's introduction is there in the flyer, but let me just add that Ramesh is an alumnus of IIM Lucknow. Long ago, he graduated and then he spent several years in the corporate sector. He's also a finance expert. And besides training the teachers of schools in better methods of teaching, he also trains corporate executives in various aspects of finance. So that's also his expertise. So he's a passionate person, and we are privileged to know him. So Ramesh, now it's all yours. And participant, just a few rules. If you have to ask any question, please raise your hand, and maybe after a while Ramesh will see them and respond. And also, if any of you are not comfortable in English, then don't worry. We request you to have patience. Towards the end, we'll have time for question answers. At that time, you can ask, and then we will see if any of us know there'll be enough people who know different languages. Ramesh knows Tamil, I know Hindi, others also know other languages, Kannada, etc. And we will try to kind of respond in those languages. Okay, Ramesh, it's all yours now.
All right. Thank you, Rahul, for the kind words. When Rahul said, I came out of IIM long ago, that's when I realized I've become really old. I just wished it was long ago and not long ago. Okay, with that. And in terms of my math training program, one of my co-conspirators is very much here, which is Bhama. And Bhama, Sendil, and myself are the three people who...
You can quickly introduce Bhama and Sendil also, Ramesh, because later on we'll exchange the contacts and all.
Bhama is master's from Indian Institute of Science, and after that she worked in software industry for many years. Her passion has been science and mathematics, and she started running a science club for children, and she runs the science club within Institute of Science itself for close to 20 years. That's a quick introduction of Bhama, and she is associated with an NGO right now, and also she, myself, and another teacher by name Sendil, who's used to be a Waldorf teacher and now a teacher of many grades in a school, farm school called Marudam Farm School in Tiruvannamalai. The three of us have developed some methods in terms of how to teach math differently. And we also have a science program which happen on the Echo platform. All of that we will share with you sometime with this particular group. And I can see a lot of familiar faces there, Bharti, Lata, and many more. So let me get started with what I wanted to do today. For some reason, all kinds of Excels are loading up. Okay.
Yes, we can see your PPT, Ramesh. Yeah.
Leela, you can see clearly?
Yes, Ramesh.
Yes.
All right, super.
Yes. We can see clearly. Yeah.
Okay. So we have about an hour. What we want to talk about is happy classrooms. I will try and finish up my slides and my talk in about 40 minutes, if not 45 will be the maximum. And then we will have adequate time for Q&A. A few minutes past 4 o'clock should also be okay. So let's do it that way. As a thought experiment, you can put it in the chat box if you like. I want you to go back and think about some day or some days when you were a child and you were sitting in a classroom and the teacher was teaching some kind of a subject. Okay. I want you to take a typical day when you were in a classroom and the teacher was teaching a subject, or many teachers were coming and going. Which one of these two groups would rather describe your state of mind? A, were you bored, anxious, judged, transactional, and sort of waiting for the bell to ring? Or did it feel like fun, creative, you're coming to a trusted environment, felt connected, and wish you had more time to learn? What was it typically? Was it group A or group B?
Any
A?
responses? Would someone like to
Yeah.
respond? You can type on the chat box.
Yeah.
So just
So many have written
speak.
group
Yeah.
A.
Okay. Okay.
Right?
Cool. Yeah.
Okay. So I can see about 10, we can stop the responses. I can see about 10 odd responses, and almost all of them, except in one or two classes, everybody said A. And if we ask ourselves this question in terms of, has this changed over time? Unfortunately, the answer to that is no. Okay. It's still the same. We come to a classroom, we feel anxious, children feel anxious. We are the teachers now. They feel judged, and they're just waiting for the bell to ring, just like we were bored and anxious and fearful and judged. But school wasn't supposed to be this way at all. When the whole idea of a school started, okay, the school traces its roots back to a Greek word called skole. Skole really means leisure, philosophy, and a lecture place. Okay, it's leisure, first of all, that there is plenty of time to spend and think and have fun. Then there is philosophy, which means there is thinking, which is involved in that. And then a lecture place. This is really what a school is meant to be. The formal schooling is a different idea. The public schooling system, or the public education system, really started about 200 years back. When it started 200 years back, the primary motivation for these schools is to develop a productive workforce for the post-industrial revolution age. We had the industrial revolution. There was so much of manufacturing goods which were happening, and we needed more and more productive workforce who could come and work in those factories, in those shops, and be able to produce the goods which were getting produced. The entire education system was therefore focused on manufacturing productive workforce, which means it was all about conformity and compliance. What is being said, you do it, and you do it repeatedly, and do it well, and do it productively, do it efficiently. And that is all that was expected out of people who are going into public education. Very different from the original idea of leisure, philosophy, lecturing place. And this kind of education, what started as a public education, this kind of education hasn't changed much in the last 200 years. In the last 200 years, we still have, well, a few things might have changed in terms of, instead of having a blackboard, it might have been replaced by a whiteboard, and in some cases by a smart board. But end of the day, it's still a chalk and talk format. End of the day, it is still a certain mechanism, a certain way in which we conduct our classrooms. But the environment around us, the problems we are facing, the problems we are solving, all of that has changed. You see, we have on one side a form of education which is continuing from what it was 200 years back. Whereas on the other side, we have an environment and the kind of problems have changed. We no longer really require factual information. If you want factual information in terms of what is the area of a trapezium, we can always Google it and find out what is the area of a trapezium. But if you want to find out how do I find the area of any amorphous space or a shape, how do I do that? That requires thinking. That's a very, very different kind of a thing as compared to acquiring information and knowledge. Now, what it has led to, all of these things, where the environment has changed, where the same type of education has been continued on and on and on, has led to a tremendous amount of academic pressure. There is competition, there is pressure, and there is anxiety in children. Nearly 81% of the children across our country said they feel anxious over studies. What a grave injustice. I mean, it's 15, 18 years of a very important phase of a child's life. And 8 to 10 hours the child is going to spend in a school and going to spend it in anxiety. So we are taking a very important part of one human life and putting it through anxious moments repeatedly, unthinkingly, and feeling that they are getting educated in the whole process, whatever that might be. Now, the anxiety cycle is a problematic cycle. It really starts with anxiety. And what does anxiety do to us? It makes sweaty palms, our stomach starts churning, our heart is beginning to beat faster, there are palpitations, and we go through all of that when we are anxious. That would mean that our working memory, the amount of mind space, the amount of memory we have to work with to solve the problem in front of us gets reduced, which leads to less amount of memory which is available to tackle the problem, leading to poor performance. And what will that do? That will increase the anxiety. And that goes back into the anxiety cycle. So this is truly the cycle a child is in. I want us to imagine this. Whether it is our children or the children we teach, okay, I'm not blaming the teachers at all in this thing. In fact, most teachers I know are very, very passionate, and I feel very much for the children and say that I want our children to do really well. I want the children to focus, do well in their exams, learn things, ask questions. I know most of the teachers are like that. It's one of the few professions I've seen people who are exceptionally dedicated and everybody wants to make a change. But we are doing things in a certain way, in a way that was used 200 years back, in the same way, within an unthinking fashion, leading to anxiety, academic pressure, and then we have lesser working memory, leading to poor performance, leading to more anxiety. And this cycle goes on and on and on and on. We have to break this cycle. And we as teachers can truly break this cycle. It is in this context we want to talk about what is called a happy classroom. What I mean by a happy classroom is not a classroom where people, whether it is kids or the teachers, are joking and laughing all the time. Happiness is quite distinctly different from joking and laughing. That is not happiness what we are talking about. We are also not talking about happiness where kids are given some paints and craft work and they are able to just throw it around and have fun. And that sometimes we call as happiness. We are not talking about that either. So it is not a classroom where we are saying we are laughing and joking and telling jokes and tapping each other, running around, throwing paints, and that's of course fun. That's not what I mean by a happy classroom here. Okay, it's definitely fun to play with colors and joke and laugh and run around and all of that. But when we talk about happy classroom, we mean something very specific. We mean, when we say a classroom which is happy, we mean a classroom where the kids are truly engaged. They are not engaged by force. They are not engaged because the teacher will punish me. They are not engaged because the teacher will shout at me if I don't keep looking at her or him. They are engaged because they find the whole topic interesting. They are engaged because they seem to be having fun while being in the class and spending time in that particular class, where they're giving almost 100% of their mind space. I've thought long and hard about it and kind of broken it down into 4 pieces as what might make a happy classroom. The 4 pieces are, first, we'll talk about all of these in a bit more detail. The first piece is thinking. A classroom that is truly thinking. Second, a classroom which is fun and practical. Third is a classroom which is trusting. And finally, a classroom which is accepting. It's a thinking classroom. It's a fun and practical classroom. It's a trusting classroom, and it's an accepting classroom. What do we mean by these 4 elements? What do we mean by a thinking classroom? There is a book which is written by, I don't know how to pronounce his surname, Liljedal, Peter Liljedal, and he says he did a lot of research, and he says that about 20% of children are thinking in a classroom, and that too, they are thinking for about 20% of the time. So if you take a typical classroom with 20 kids, about 4 of them are thinking, and in 45 minutes, they're thinking for about 10 minutes. 4 kids are thinking about what we are talking for about 10 minutes, and the rest of them are not thinking. They are not focusing. Okay, I'm not saying they're not focusing. Many kids are focusing on the class, but they're not thinking about the problem which we are giving. What do we mean by they're focusing but not thinking? Of course, when you're focusing, you're thinking. No, thinking is different from focusing. Thinking is when they are thinking about the problem in an original fashion, using their critical thinking faculties, using their logic, using their application methods. They're thinking about it in an original fashion. One of the reasons why thinking doesn't happen is because of what one calls as a didactic contract. A didactic contract is, as a teacher, we feel we have to impart the knowledge very quickly in an efficient manner to our children. If you are given a problem, x squared minus 7x plus 12 equal to something, we'll immediately tell them how to factorize. We'll tell them, look at the 7x has to add up and it has to multiply to 12. So we give them the how to process. The didactic contract is where we feel the urge and the urgency to tell them how something is done. And then once we have taught them how it is done, we want the children to repeat how it is done. But even more problematic than the didactic contract is when we have shortcuts. Shortcuts, we have things like mnemonics, where we remember various things. There was just 3 or 4 days back, my son, he's now 22, his friend from childhood had come over, and he was telling me, uncle, I almost failed in mathematics in 10th grade. And then I went for tuition, and this teacher told me how to remember in trigonometry. He said, remember this, Pandit Badri Prasad Har Har Bole. I said, what is Pandit Badri Prasad Har Har Bole? Okay, so he said, P is for perpendicular, B is for base, and H is for hypotenuse. So P by H is sine theta, B by H, base by hypotenuse, is cos theta, and perpendicular by base is equal to tan theta. He said that's how he has been asked to remember Pandit Badri Prasad Har Har Bole, is the way he remembered trigonometry. Okay, if you remember trigonometry like this, and we are faced with a real life problem in trigonometry, there is no way we are going to be able to understand how this trigonometry or how this problem is going to be solved.
We've been using a lot of such shortcuts, Ramesh. We have been taught.
Yeah, we use a lot of such shortcuts, and none of these shortcuts, they might work in terms of getting some marks in examination, but they don't work in the long term at all. Okay.
Yeah.
Even more problematic than shortcut. Shortcut is a hugely problematic idea, is this idea called mimicking. Now, mimicking is a problem. I'll tell you what mimicking is. When I was talking about x squared plus 7x plus 12 equal to 0, and we tell our children immediately, you take the 7 and think of a number combination where the multiplication of them will become 12. So it is 4 and 3. So you make it as x squared plus 4x plus 3x plus 12 or something like that, we say, and we break it down and say, this is how you do it. Okay, the moment you've told somebody how to do it, we are now asking them to copy it. We are saying, this is how it is done, and you copy my method. This is called mimicking. Mimicking is you follow, you look at how I am doing it, and you do it exactly the same way. Okay, we sometimes confuse mimicking with thinking, and that is why I say that mimicking is even more problematic. All of us understand shortcuts. All of us understand the limitations of a shortcut because it doesn't look like the right way to understand or learn a certain subject. Whereas when it comes to mimicking, we actually think that is proper learning, but it is mimicking, which means you're seeing how the teacher is doing it, and then you're applying it to another problem, but you don't know why we did it in a certain way. We didn't think of something and come up with that particular way. So it is really about I do as a teacher, then we do as a classroom, and finally you do. So first I do, you watch, and then you and I together will do, and then you do, and we gain mastery. The problem with mimicking is it will be able to solve the problems in an exam hall. It has short-term positive value. Actual learning and actual thinking does not happen. But what we gain in the process is knowledge. But knowledge can never replace thinking. Now, if you're terribly confused where I'm going with this, the next slide will hopefully help as to what is thinking. Thinking is when you go through cognitive struggle. When you're struggling with a certain problem, when you don't know how to go about it, when we are given a puzzle, we don't know where to start. We don't even know whether the puzzle we have to apply geometry or algebra or what we have to apply. Then we have to necessarily go through what is called a cognitive struggle, a struggle in thinking. We don't know whether to go left or right or forwards or backwards. We have no idea how to approach it. And that's a very, very beautiful process we go through, which is why many of us enjoy doing puzzles. The reason we enjoy solving Sudoku or a crossword is because all of them, we don't know where to start. There's a very beautiful puzzle called a Tower of Hanoi puzzle. A Tower of Hanoi puzzle, many of you would have seen it. If you're given a puzzle like this, there are only two simple rules to this puzzle. One, you have to lift only one disk at a time. Two, you can never put a big disk on a small disk, and you have to transfer all the disks from one peg to another. Okay, you can Google Tower of Hanoi to find out what the Tower of Hanoi problem is all about. When you're given a Tower of Hanoi problem, it actually happened to me. My uncle was a math teacher. He once gave to me in my village. I was sitting where the cows were kept, and I was in a charpai. And he came to me and he said, I want you to try and solve this puzzle. Okay, I took an enormous amount of time. I still remember I was so engrossed for about 2 or 3 hours in trying to solve that particular puzzle when I was all of 9, 10, 12 years old. And I had actually forgotten to eat lunch. Okay, so I'm not saying that I was such a great guy, I forgot to eat lunch and skipped and I was so focused. Everyone is. Each one of us, when faced with a truly interesting thinking problem, we completely forget about what is happening. The thinking problem could be in language, the thinking problem could be in history, it could be in science. All of us would have gone through this. But we don't let our children go through that because we are always under a certain pressure. We are always on a treadmill trying to run from one place to another and to reach where? If it is not leading to greater thinking, we should not be running so hard at all. We can slowly, in a relaxed fashion, allow the thinking process to take shape. The second question often I get asked is, where do I find such problem? There is a Tower of Hanoi, fair enough, but Tower of Hanoi, A, doesn't come in the examinations, and B, where do I find problems like this? You know what the answer is? These problems are there in every topic before we give out the answers. If you give a child a simple problem like, is 4 by 7 bigger than 5 by 9? Let us say we don't tell them how to do it. What will they have to do? They have no tools now. We are not teaching them LCM. We are not telling them make the denominator as a common denominator. We are not doing any cross multiplication. We are not telling them anything. Now you tell me which is bigger. You know what a fraction is. You know what is half. You know what is 1/4, 1/3, 2/3, whatever. Which is bigger, 4 by 7 or 5 by 9? And allow the problem to simmer in the class. Don't get into saying, now today we will compare two problem where we will compare whether it is 4 by 7 or 5 by 9, which is greater. Whenever you're faced with a problem which have different denominators, immediately make the denominators common and make the denominator equal to 63 and blah, blah, and everything else. That's killing the problem. So in the whole process, all we are telling them is, don't think, I will tell you how it is done and you copy how I'm doing it. So it is I do, then we do, and then you do. That's mimicking. Mimicking is not thinking. Shortcut is not thinking. Thinking is, when faced with a problem, how will the child approach it? This struggle, this cognitive struggle, immediately gets nullified, or it lasts only till we tell them how. And therefore, it's very, very important we do not tell the classroom how it is done. We have to try and postpone answering that. We have to go through the struggle process. It can be any topic. It can be a topic, what do you think might have happened? What led to the fall of a certain dynasty in history? And then we can think about it. We can explore. We can cognize, we can go through the struggle, rather than saying, you know, what was the end or the downfall of this particular empire? This another kingdom came and they beat this particular. That's just letting the cat out of the bag. That's just killing the whole joy of thinking itself. And if possible, please ensure you always close the class with a thinking problem. So that's one of the 4 points. The second one is, you want your class to be fun and practical. What do we mean by fun and practical? The first is, let us ask exploratory questions. Exploratory questions is questions like, how do you think this works? Why do you think something happened? What do you think might have happened because of something? It is about asking those W questions. We are not giving away any answers whatsoever. We are not pushing them in a certain direction at all. We just ask exploratory questions as to, why do you think something like this might have happened? How do you think it happened? What is happening here? I don't fully understand. Do you understand? It's a very exploratory, it's a scientific, it's a treasure hunt kind of an idea, right? We have a clue. We are going to now go and treasure hunt and find out what the answer is. So we all become scientists, we all become explorers, we all kind of, take ourselves from the current space to going back to a time in history and imagining what is happening or what might have happened in that place. And we are going through that bit of magic. Okay. And going through that magic, like reading a book, going through that magic is fun. That's exploration. The second big idea in fun and practical is, start with a problem or some kind of a problem statement where most of the children in a class can answer it. Most of the children in a class will be able to answer it because it has a low floor, and slowly start growing the problem. So for example, if you take a 3 by 3 by 3 cube, like a Rubik's cube, remove all the stickers and paint the outside in one color, let's say white. Now we explore the question, how many of these tiny cubes are painted on 3 sides? How many of these tiny cubes, 27 tiny cubes, right? How many of the tiny cubes are painted on 2 sides? How many on 1 side? And how many are not painted at all? Now, this is a low floor problem. Most children will be able to say that 8 cubes are painted on 3 sides and 12 of them are painted on 2 sides, or whatever that might be. Many children will be able to say that answer. Then we take the ceiling slightly higher and say, what if it's a 4 by 4 by 4 cube? What if it's a 5 by 5? The answer itself is not that important. You see, we are doing something fun, we are doing something practical, and we are making our children think. That's all. The answer itself, if you think about it, is not that important. It is not important to actually solve the problem. It is important to think. It is important to have fun. It is important to enjoy the process. It's important to feel fulfilled while doing that. The answer itself, whether it's 23 cubes of a certain kind or none painted or whatever it is not that important. So we don't need to be in a hurry to answer. Similarly, we can build an intuitive understanding. We can always start with an intuitive understanding. Like for instance, in an algebra class, you can apply it to any class. In an algebra class, I normally carry some pebbles in my hand. Let's say I have 5 pebbles in my hand. I hide them behind me. The children don't know that. And I tell them I have some pebbles in my hand. I add 4 to it. It'll be a total of 9. They will think about it and say 5. What they don't know is they've actually solved a problem called x plus 4 equal to 9. The intuition is already out there. And our job is to just bring the intuition out. Our job is to slowly collect the butter as it is coming out. You know, the churning is the process which we have to do. And as the butter comes out, we just slowly bring it out. We slowly extract it from the child. Then it is the child's thinking, the child's intuition, the child's idea, which is leading to the answer, which is a very empowering thing for the child. And then we can provide the conceptual framework if required. And finally, we tell them what the formula is. Now that way, it's a very important change which happens in a child. The child understands, I can solve this problem. I can solve it with my thinking and my intuition. And the formula is something I'm using as a tool. The formula is not your boss. The kitchen knife is not our boss, right? We as cooks in the kitchen are the boss, and the knife is something we are using. I know I can take beans and start breaking it into small pieces. It's just too cumbersome to do that if I have to make some beans sabji. Instead, I use a knife. If my knife is not there and I'm stranded in an island and all I can get is beans, I can of course break it with my hand. I know that I can break it with my hand. I don't think of it as saying, oh, I need the knife, otherwise I'll go hungry. Whereas in a math class or in any other class or a science class, we think, oh, there is no formula. I've forgotten the formula. I don't know how to solve the problem. We can still solve the problem. It's just that we don't have the formula. So the formulas are important, don't get me wrong, but they have to occupy the right space in the hierarchy. It is my thinking and my intuition which is leading me to the answer. And along the way, I use a very important vehicle, a very important tool called the formula. The second element of fun and practical is where I want us to take real examples. What do we mean by real examples? Let's take a typical question we would have all seen in any book. We will say something like, Rama went to a shop with 100 rupees, bought 4 erasers. Each eraser is 10 rupees. And he gave the shopkeeper 100 rupees. And how many rupees did the shopkeeper give back? You see, it's very impersonal. Instead, if there is a child in the class, and we know what is the favorite food of the child, we can use that as an example. We can say, you see Mamta who's sitting there, and you can say she goes to a shop to buy her favorite food, masala dosa, and go on like that. We didn't do anything other than remembering the child's name, Mamta, and knowing that her favorite food is masala dosa, and remembering to use that as an example instead of some Rama going and buying some eraser somewhere. So this connects a class, believe it or not, it connects a class hugely when we take real examples. The second one is take examples which are intertwined to some of the key skills children have to learn in the current world, but are not taught explicitly. You can bring in elements of if we have to start a business, if you have an entrepreneur, or we can bring our civic and social responsibilities and rights. We can integrate with financial literacy. When we are doing, let's say, simple interest, let's go and find out which bank is giving the best interest. That will be a practical work. Rather than us simply doing the work, go and find out from a bank manager, if you put 1,000 rupee deposit in 1 month, how much it will become, 2 months, how much it will become, 3 months, how much it will become. Go and find out, is it really being done that way? So get ourselves educated, our children educated on financial literacy. Engage in conversations around digital dieting. If you think all children are getting focused on the screens and everything else, how do we really meaningfully bring about digital dieting so we don't overeat the amount of content which is coming from the internet and gadgets or communication or any of these things? Third, get into moral and ethical dilemmas, because moral ethical dilemmas lead to thinking and they lead to engaging conversations. Sometimes I've asked some of these questions to the children in my class, and I found the answers to be quite interesting, honestly. One of the questions I ask is, are there really good people and bad people? This is all. I don't have any further question. I can tell you 20 minutes the kids will be discussing this. Okay, the question is simply, are there good people and bad people? Okay, or is it that all people are a little bit good and bad? We don't know. Are there good people? So then I ask them, whenever we say, I'm giving you an unbiased opinion, is anybody unbiased? Or when we say I give you an unbiased opinion, all I mean is I put my biases, not your biases. Okay, we can ask simple questions like that. We can ask a question. Many times people come back and say, in India, this cannot happen, that cannot happen because we have such a big population. Is population really an asset or a liability? Now, these are questions which are thinking questions. And believe me, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th graders can truly engage in conversations like this. Now, these kind of conversations woven into some of the life skills we are talking about, using real examples of something which happened in our school, in our environment, in the people who are there, makes it fun, makes it practical, and makes it very, very engaging. And while doing all these things, the only thing we have to guard against is we should not be too quick to prompt, and because our own biases and our own ideas will come in, we should not prompt and say, that is a good answer. That's a good answer. Can you say that again? None of that. We are not prompting, and we will not put our biases, and we will not pronounce any judgment. We just listen to all sides of the story, and people can always know what is being said or spoken. If nothing else, they get exposed and they become richer. And in the process, they would have learned the subject as well. So we are weaving the subject through this. We're not saying only do this. You take your subject and weave it in through this. We can take a Hindi, we can take a Tamil or a Kannada or an English or a history or any of those things and weave it through this fun and practical way of getting into real good, solid dilemmas. Okay, good practical problems and something which is woven into real life. Right. Which brings us then to the third point, which is trust. What do we mean by trust? A trusting classroom is a classroom which is not being judged, where as a child, we would have all felt, I don't like this teacher, because, most of the time we don't like a teacher because the teacher doesn't seem to like me. I don't like this teacher because this teacher is always saying something wrong about me. Now, this is judgment. A non-judgmental classroom is a happy classroom. So the first step towards that is to get to know the child. In the case of a child, there are not many things we need to know about a child. There are just 4 things we should remember. What is the name of the child? What is the date of birth of the child? What is the favorite food of the child? And what is some hero of the child? It could be a hero, a sports person, or any of those things. Who's a hero for that person? If possible, what do their parents do and how many siblings they have? If we get to know the child, we can use in our real examples we talked about earlier. When we are using dilemmas, we can bring some of these things and create real dilemmas in the class. And through the process, we are able to create learning. And definitely don't segregate and label children as this is a fast learner, slow learner, responsible, irresponsible, smart, intelligent. Don't label. And by the way, a smart label is as bad as labeling somebody as slow. We might find it extremely difficult to accept that, but I can go on for another 1 hour explaining to you why, through the mindset kind of an idea, why a smart labeling is also equally bad as compared to labeling somebody as dumb and slow and all those kinds of things. By all means, you can praise the process. In fact, take every opportunity to praise a child for the process. What do we mean by that? We can say, I really like the fact that you were able to spend time on this. Oh, this looks so beautiful. Continue to try along this axis. Okay. So not giving up, that's very good. So any of those things, anything on the process, we can praise. But do not praise by saying, you're such an intelligent boy, intelligent girl, no, don't do that. Okay. And even inside of you, we have to lose it. Because we will do cueing, which is body language cueing. If you think a child is a slow learner, we will do the cueing in our body language and the child will pick it up. So we have to actually stop believing in the idea called slow learner and fast learner, and then we will not give the wrong cues. Most of the time, try and see if we can assess for learning, rather only rarely assess what has been learned. Assessment of learning should be kept as rare as possible. And remember, you are not a sage on the stage. You're just a guide on the side, helping the children to discover themselves, learn, and you're slightly guiding them and saying, turn this way or that way, a little bit guiding them so that they can discover the world which is around them. They can discover the world which is inside of them, and they can discover the overall beauty of this particular life rather than just taking some book and ratifying and everything else and saying how to do it and this is how it is done and that is how it is done. This is pretty much what I have, except one important thing I want to tell you, which is this idea called teaching to fail. Now, if I were to ask you, what is the opposite of the word success? Many of us, the first word which comes to our mind is failure. Then we ask ourselves the question, do you know of anybody who has been successful who has not failed? There is almost no one who has been successful who has not failed. Then in which case, we can't say the opposite of success is failure. Then the only thing we can say is success and failure are together. If there is nobody who is successful who has not failed, then success and failure are joined together. If you need success, you need to know how to fail. The opposite, therefore, of success is giving up. The opposite of success is not trying. The opposite of success is giving reasons. I would have done it, but this particular thing happened. I would have come to school on time, but the bus was late. I would have done the homework, but there was no power supply. I would have done all of these things, and we do it ourselves. All the time, we keep giving answers in terms of what should have changed with my town or my city or with my government or with my spouse or my children or my parents or my in-laws or my colleagues
And
or all
Ramesh,
of
I
them.
would just like to add here that a lot of us also tend to blame the students when we are not so effective in our teaching outcomes, right?
Yes, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also our students. Okay. So we have to understand failing is not the opposite. It is a part of the process of learning itself. So if we want our kids to be successful, they have to learn how to fail. If we don't know how to fail, we cannot be successful. When we say, I hope you don't fail, no, we should be saying, I hope you fail. There's an old Chinese proverb that says, if you really want to punish someone, give them success for 40 years. Okay, which basically says that when you fail the 41st time, the fall will be so hard, we can't get up from that fall. Okay, if you really want to punish someone, give them 40 years of success or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. There's a Chinese proverb. The reason why it is so difficult to fail is simply a few things. One is social cueing. Because we believe the opposite of success is failure, or we believe that successful people don't fail. We say things like, oh, that's the right answer, and this is the wrong answer. The moment we have these ideas of right and wrong, is the right method or it's a reasonably accurate way to go about it, it's fine. I mean, there are certain questions for which the answers are right and wrong. But when we stress on getting the answer right, when we stress on the destination, and when we call the opposite of not reaching the destination as a failure, there's a lot of social cueing which happens there, where we have forgotten the whole process of trying, the whole process of thinking, the whole process of going through the cognitive struggle, the whole fun and the joy we had along the way, the whole trusting environment. We break all of that and say that it is fail or it is wrong. That's a social cueing. So the moment we use words like fail, then we are automatically putting failure as the opposite of success. All of this leads to what is called a fixed mindset. Okay, we don't have time to go into fixed mindset. So I'll wrap it up here and say, when it comes to a happy classroom, it's really about four things. Can we make a classroom which is thinking? A classroom which is not I do, we do, you do. Instead, it is starting with a problem, asking something like, what do you think? Is 4/7 bigger or 5/9 bigger? And not giving any clues whatsoever. If that means wasting 45 minutes, we will waste 45 minutes, because that wastage is probably the most amazing thing you can do to a classroom, because you would have made all the children think about it. And while they're going through the thinking, don't prompt them and don't be in a hurry to tell them what the answer is. And later we can tell them how the process is. And as much as possible, try to avoid mimicking and completely avoid shortcuts. No more Pandit Badri Prasad Har Har Bole. The second one is trying to keep it fun and practical, which is just taking some practical problems, weaving in some real life situation, using real examples of children and their names and their favorite food and everything else, and adding an element of, there are many, many ways in which we can make every topic fun and practical, asking all those moral dilemma questions. Children love dilemmas. Okay, and they're wonderfully opinionated. They will come with all kinds of ideas and very strong opinions in terms of why something is right and wrong. And the moment you throw a dilemma, it will force them to question themselves. When there is a very strong idea of right and wrong, and you're able to throw a dilemma, suddenly they will realize something has hit them. Okay, but we are not judging them. We are not pronouncing any judgment. That creates the whole environment fun. And the third one is trusting. If a child doesn't trust you, we can do all that we want in a classroom and the child will not listen, or the children will not listen. Children will only listen to a person they trust. Emotional trust, emotional connection with the child is more important than anything else in a classroom, at least up to the age of 8th or 9th grade. And finally, it is about failing, which is a part of the process and not something which is very different from the process of learning itself. Yeah, so it's very much a part of the process of learning. And that's all I have. I have taken a little more than 45 minutes.
And finally, Lata says, can we have part 2 of Ramesh's webinar? Sometime in the future, we'll have it. I'm
Sometime
sure.
in the future, we can have it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.